G'day humans, Chris Stepp from Finder here. Today I'm talking about the Asus Zephyrus G14 laptop, the 2022 edition, which is just about to come out here in Australia and the rest of the world as well. Now, Finder's tech writer Alex Kidman is also one of the most respected tech journalists in Australia. He's been at it for well over 2 decades, probably 3 decades. Geez, I don't want to make him feel too old. We all feel too old. He's been taking it through its paces over the last couple of weeks. Now, he has done the review on the find.com.au website. I'll put a link below so you can read his full thoughts, but I thought I'd jump on a quick Zoom chat with him and ask him a few of the questions that you may be asking yourself about whether or not this is the right laptop for you. Let's jump in and have a chat to Alex. Okay, Alex, thanks very much for joining us, mate, to talk about the Asus Zephyrus G14.
Yeah, this is the 2022 edition because any given gaming laptop, or heck, any given laptop you want to talk about, pretty much annually there'll be some kind of upgrade.
Absolutely. And I was looking up beforehand, just having a bit of research myself. I noticed that there's 3 different variants now. Asus obviously been in the gaming laptop space for quite a long time now. But there's 3 variants: the Flow, there's the Zephyrus, and the Strix. So what's the difference between us? Like, who's this hitting?
So the Flow is their really light tablet-y style gaming system. So I just did the Z13 for Finder. People can look that review up. The Strix is their more flexible unit that takes on an external eGPU. So it's more of the power play, but it's a laptop in name only. You're basically tethering it to a desk if you're using it most of the time. And the Zephyrus is your comfortable middle ground. So it's your more traditional looking laptop. Look, here's one right now. It's much more a kind of standard 14-inch notebook form factor. They talk about it being kind of ultra thin and so on. I'm not really buying that. This is a regular laptop. It's certainly not your big chunky 17-inch beast that you need a lot of weightlifting to get around with, but it's a much more regular laptop. So it's the middle ground of those 3 sub-brands.
Right, okay. And look, you mentioned before about a lot of iteration. Yes, we see these laptops kind of coming out year after year. So in the case of this model, 2022, are we talking about iteration or is some actual evolution here as well?
Look, by and large, for the stuff that I think people are going to care about, it's iteration. It's updated AMD processors and GPUs is the really big, exciting story here. Asus might argue that they have actually evolved their Anime Matrix screen. This is the back LED screen that you can put messages on and things like that, or animated patterns. That has improved over the years. I guess you could say that's evolved. It's not exactly a killer feature, though. It's kind of their take on the RGB lighting that you see in just about any gaming product. A bit more flexible than that, and you can now play a few silly games on it. I wasn't hugely taken with it, and I don't think anyone's going to buy it just for that. That's probably or arguably the evolved part. There's some upgrades as well internally in terms of airflow and cooling, but by and large, this is about that speed and power game that so many gaming laptops aspire to.
And do you think there's enough, I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about what you really liked about the laptop, but do you think there is enough of a speed and improve there to justify consumers looking at the 2022 model over maybe saving a bit of cash and going for an earlier model?
Look, I think with all of these things, there's always that balance between the price you pay and the amount of power you're going to get. If you could get a prior Zephyrus model at a really good discount, that's still going to be a good buy for a lot of people and a lot of people doing mobile gaming. This is sitting more on that cutting edge. And I guess the balance there, and this has classically always been the case, if you buy a gaming laptop that's on the cutting edge, you stay current for so much longer. Whereas if you buy last year's model, you're already behind the pace a bit. You're going to get a little bit less time out of it. But there's no easy answer to that kind of budget versus power preference thing.
True. Well, let's talk budget then. I mean, how much are these things going for in Australia here? And does that represent good value from what you've seen with the laptops you've been reviewing recently?
So Asus list pricing for this, the only pricing that I've got at the current time, is starting at $2,999. So this is not cheap. That being said, this is what higher-end gaming laptops sell for. So I don't know that it's a bargain, and the model that I have tested is a much higher spec version than I suspect that $3,000 price point buys you. So I'm not going to say that it's an utter bargain, but it's certainly within the scope of what you're going to spend on one of these current gen 2022 machines, whether you buy it from someone like ASUS or Razer or anyone else.
Yeah, I was about to say, because I'm not sure if you notice the same thing, but I find with the laptops when we're doing these reviews, like the prices with the specs that you get, they're pretty consistent across the different providers and models, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, that's not exactly surprising because they're all working off the same components and the same stock of components. So maybe once in a while, one of them is able to cut a better deal and get, 4 million GPUs at 5 cents off, and that translates to a slightly cheaper laptop down the track. But by and large, they're all building off the same components. And of course, one of the dirty secrets of the notebook industry is there's only a handful of factories that are making these anyway. So these models are rolling off factories very, very similar, or essentially nearby competing brand gaming laptops.
All right, well, let's talk about then what impressed you about the 2022 ASUS Zephyrus G14.
So the big thing that impressed me was the amount of power that it gives you as a gamer or as a content creator. I guess those are their two core markets for this particular laptop. Definite boosts in performance, such that it is one of the fastest gaming laptops that I've tested to date. Now, if you put that up against the best that ASUS or Alienware or Razer or so on do in their big 17-inch behemoths, where they've got so much more space for batteries and cooling and features like that, and of course they charge accordingly, it's still a little below that. But for a 14-inch model, this is really impressive. It'll run pretty much anything you want at basically the kind of frame rates that most gamers are going to like. There is a trade-off, and again, this happens with a lot of gaming laptops, between whether you go for 120 hertz screen, which is what ASUS sent me to review, or 144 hertz, which is obviously going to come down to the level of kind of Twitch gaming that you do and whether that better refresh rate at a slightly lower resolution is worth it to you.
And it's got the DisplayPort. Is it DisplayPort 1.4 required for VR?
It does. I will say I haven't done VR testing on it, but it should be perfectly capable of that. And I mean, I think now for current gaming laptops, VR should be an assumed component, or support for it should be fairly much assumed. If you are buying an older system or a cheaper system, yeah, you might get some compromise there. Obviously worth checking if VR is important to you. And
what about needs to improve, mate? So what do you think wasn't quite up to spec in this year's model?
So there's some little things. This is something that I find, and maybe this is just a personal quirk, but I would love for some of these slightly thicker, slightly larger laptops to throw more ports in around the sides and to balance them a little bit better in terms of left and right, because depending on your peripheral choices, it can get a bit tangled, it can get a bit difficult. I didn't mind the keyboard, and that's often an issue with some gaming laptops where they'll either go for a kind of mechanical style keyboard. There's obviously limits to how high you can raise those keys, and you end up with something which might be okay for your classic, WASD arrangement, but is not necessarily that great if you actually have to type something out at the same time. That was okay. They've increased the size of the trackpad, which a lot of people will love. I don't. But that's more because I don't tend to look down at the trackpad when I'm typing, and quite often my hands will run across it and suddenly the mouse cursor's gone mad or whatever. Again, that's a personal taste matter. And obviously, it's not inexpensive, but that's par for the course for gaming.
Is it at least a centered trackpad, or is it off the side of the spacebar?
It's mostly centered. It's more just the expanded size of it that hit me personally. But yeah, like I said, that's a total taste test kind of matter.
Well, it's interesting you say that about the typing, because I feel like there might be a segment of consumers that are like, look, I want a laptop that I am going to use for work and entertainment primarily, but I do want to be able to play those top tier games when the occasion takes me. Do you think this type of laptop's just too heavy, or the battery's just not up to scratch to go for a gaming laptop if that's your use case?
Look, it's an interesting one, actually, because I can see two sides to this argument. On the one hand, this is a very gamey looking laptop. I mean, that Anime Matrix screen at the back is so look at me kind of design. And lots of gamers will love that, but lots of professionals who might look at this and go, well, this has got a great CPU, good GPU, so I could use it for video rendering or photo or video work. It'd be a good match case there. Might look at it and go, oh, well, yeah, I don't really want to pay for that. You can switch it off, thankfully, but they're not necessarily going to want it. Battery life was very mixed in my testing. So with gaming-related titles, it was amongst the worst. And let's be clear here, gaming laptops just never have good battery life, never have great battery life. But even amongst the models we've tested, it was on the lower end of those for gaming. But running a much lighter test of just video streaming, it was right up amongst the very best. So if you were looking at it from that professional viewpoint, if you had one of these and you had to lug it around between meetings in the office, I reckon it'd actually probably last the distance pretty well, as long as you weren't, sneaking in a few lunchtime games without plugging it in.
And obviously you're looking at a 14-inch laptop here, which traditionally might be on the smaller side for gamers. I know that they look like they've gone to a 1610. Is that correct? It's slightly bigger screen, but how do you feel like, obviously you played some games on it, how do you feel like gaming on that 14-inch screen for those who may think maybe that's a bit small for games?
Look, I think it's okay. And again, it feels to me like a taste kind of question. I tend to find 17-inch laptops, they're great for that immersion thing, but they're so big. And there's a point at which my head just goes, you know what, I'd probably rather have something smaller that I can then plug into an external display, which obviously you can do with this, but that's still suitable to, for example, if you're sitting on a plane or a train, to pop onto your lap without crushing the bloke next to you. And that's where this kind of market segment works really well. I think it actually hits a bit of a sweet spot of most people's needs. Again, some people will violently disagree with me because this is the internet, and they will say, no, you've got to have 17 inches, 14 inches is too small. I can't even look at it without wanting to be violently ill, or words to that extreme. I think for most people, though, this will be just fine.
I'll look at it. Weighs 1.65 kilos from memory, which doesn't seem too bad for a gaming laptop. Not like the lugs I used to get from Alienware and so forth. They used to be, so heavy.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And look, if you did have to carry it around all day, you're going to feel that relative to what we see in Ultrabooks these days, where, under a kilo is that kind of sweet spot they all try and aspire towards. There's definitely a difference there. But for regular carrying around between meetings, for slinging into a backpack or whatever, it's fine. And as you say, we've both tested so many gaming laptops where you pick it up and you're instantly just thinking, am I playing a game or am I having a workout?
Well, I think it's fair to say ultimately that they're focusing on gamers here. I think content creators, like you say, could get some value out of these impressive performance of the specs. But who do you think should buy this laptop?
So you've got to be a reasonably cashed up gamer. You've got to be able to afford it in its better specs. That's kind of the entryway position for it. There are definitely cheaper gaming laptops, both ASUS models and other brands and older stock and so on. I think you've got to have the need for that cutting edge of hardware. I suppose it is also worth noting that, as we were talking about before, so many of the components are common. We will see the components in this iterated with other manufacturers. Whether they can do the battery life and the cooling and things like that to the same degree, we'll have to wait and see and test, of course. But there'll be a lot of competition for this laptop in that space. And I think when you're spending that much money, it is worth comparing. It's worth thinking, right, which model is right for me? Which thing appeals to me? As I said, the Anime Matrix thing really didn't do it for me. But there are some people who might look at that and just go, that is the cutest thing ever, and I have to have it.
Actually, you just mentioned one thing I just got to quickly touch on. You mentioned cooling. Now, from memory, there's been some work on the cooling with this particular laptop. How do you find it when you see on your lap and under load?
Under load, it was fair. You could definitely tell the fans were going. It was definitely getting warm. But I've tested so many gaming laptops which have said, oh, we've got brilliant cooling this year. And I've put them on my lap. And after 10 minutes, I'm just thinking, yeah, I've got to go grab a stable table because otherwise my legs are going to be bacon. And this did not hit that even when I was pushing it pretty hard.
All right, unreal, Alex. As always, mate, fantastic analysis. Thank you very much for your time and taking us all through that.
My pleasure.
So there you go, guys and girls. There's Alex's thoughts on the ASUS Sapphirus G14 laptop, 2022 model. It's just coming out now here in June in Australia. Now, you can head down to the fine.com.au website to learn more from his full written review. I will put that in the description below. You can also find some other laptop reviews by Alex, myself, and the other tech writers from Finder on the website and also on this YouTube channel. Thank you very much for watching. And until next time, happy gaming.